Let's start with Auburn. How did you get there? How did you know that you wanted to go into broadcast? Has it always been journalism? And what did you learn?
It was up until 2019 when I retired from sportscasting. But yes, I went to school. I went to Auburn. I had no idea. I'm not gonna say I had no idea. I couldn't quantify exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I was great in front of people. I knew that I was a people person. I knew I wanted to do something like in front of people. And I thought I wanted to do originally broadcast news, but then I quickly realized that house fires and car wrecks are just not my thing at all. And so, so very quickly I was working with the campus TV station Eagle Eye. And I remember one day I got sent out to do report on a baseball game, and I was interviewing the assistant coach, Steve Renfro, and my eyeballs were shaking. I was nervous. I was sweating, but I had what I call my epiphany, my God moment, my aha moment, and that was when the clouds parted and the sun shone through, and it was like this is what you're supposed to do, Rachel Joy, and so at that point in time, I started focusing on sports within Eagle Eye on campus, and then really never looked back for 17 years. And it was an amazing career. Broke a lot of barriers and ceilings and made places for women that they exist today. And it just makes me really, really happy and brings me a lot of joy.
So why was it baseball? Do you think that you would have had the same epiphany working a football game?
Oh,
Working
absolutely.
a basketball game?
Yeah, it just happened to be the assignment. It just happened to be the assignment. I mean, just a few weeks after that, I was working a football game, and I remember being on the sidelines and just the speed of the game and the crunch of the helmets and the adrenaline and all of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. Like, there's no way. And during that time, I remember there was a white supremacist group that was on campus that was leaving flyers for there's leaving flyers all over the place for meetings. And I remember going to my editor at the Eagle Eye and saying, hey, I want to go like undercover. And he looked at me like, you're a fool. Like, he said, pretty much, look in the mirror, look at you, like you're, Native American, Hispanic, and, and all of these things. Like, you're what they hate, Rachel. You're like a Heinz 57, like you can't go undercover. You're what they hate. And so I remember that. I remember some just really sad stories and hard stories. And I remember I would just take them home. And that's how I recognized I cannot do those things. And I think that also led to, in the 17 years, where people came to know me. My middle name is Joy, but I gravitated towards human interest stories. I gravitated towards telling the heart of the matter. I gravitated towards telling the rest of the story. Told some pretty amazing stories about Dak Prescott and Derrick Henry and Dabo Sweeney and the Sabins. And I mean, I told some really heartfelt stories that other people did not get. And I think it can trace it back to, one, who I was created to be by God. But secondly, that desire to do something that mattered to me and that I wouldn't go home crying about at night.
Do you find that working in the SEC cultivated that athlete mindset more so than if you had, say, been at a different Power 5 conference? Because you had such incredible sports with every type of sport.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But I, with my work now with I'm Changing the Narrative, I find the same athlete at small schools in North Dakota as I do at Auburn. And, people might say that's what are you talking about? They're facing the same things. They're dealing with the same things. They are, I mean, all of it is the same. And so, yeah, they might have a little bit of, difference in their skill set, but what athletes are facing at big schools or small schools is, and the pressure that athletes put on themselves is the same. So yes, was I very, very fortunate and very, very blessed to work inside the SEC, the ACC, and then eventually nationally as the first female host on Sirius XM collegiate channels. But I feel like wherever I had landed, I would have shot down this road of finding the human interest, finding the joy. I I remember over the years in my career, there were people that, I had opportunities to have gotcha stories, to have like stories that were negative, that stories that didn't make the people comfortable. And I just chose each time I chose the relationship over the story. And I left that investigative reporting to other people who are really, really good at it. That was never my thing, never my bag. And I think if more people found what really drives their soul, I think they would be happier and more peaceful.
Getting back to the everyone has a story that you kind of alluded to right there,
Yeah.
I have interviewed a lot of Olympians, a lot of gold medalists, but I've also interviewed D2 and D3 athletes. And the
Yeah.
stories that come out of those guests are just fascinating to me because, if anything, they need more spotlight on them because they don't have D1 athletic departments to back them up. They're
Mhm.
fundraising for new uniforms.
Yeah.
They're not working with nutritionists. They're not working with student success teams
Mhm.
with like 15 people working handedly to get them to succeed. It's a different life, and I think that those stories are just as important as larger D1 athletic departments.
Absolutely. That's, again, we have a mental health coalition, and I'm changing the narrative, where we have athletes from all over the country that come together once a month to talk, to share, to talk about ideas, to ways to change a narrative on their campus, ways to affect change in their communities, their teams, all of those things. And like I said, their experiences are the same: big schools, small schools, North Dakota, Maryland, Kansas, California, Utah, wherever they are, their stories are the same. I would say this about Olympics and Olympians, and there almost has to be another level of, like, another gear, if you will, where you are a self motivator, where you can kick your own butt, where you can cheer for yourself, where you can talk yourself. I mean, that to me is like, it's, yeah, team sport is absolutely amazing. Don't get me wrong. And some Olympians obviously are in team sport, but having that training and you being responsible for being your greatest motivator is pretty spectacular. And I just have so much respect. I have so much respect for athletes in general, both male and female, and what they do and what they've put their, how they put their body and their minds and their souls on the line, and then what happens afterwards. And that's one of the big things we talk about, and I'm changing the narrative.
It's one of the big things that I end up talking about as well. I can almost guarantee, like clockwork, that we will talk about athlete identity at some point in the interview. It doesn't matter if the athlete that I'm talking to is at the beginning of their career, is a storied veteran. It's always like, what's the next step? I've done everything I wanted to do. I've won a national championship. I've won a gold medal in the Olympics. I'm fighting for a starting spot. What comes next? It's always that kind of what comes next mentality. And I find that if you don't slow down a little in that mindset, you
Mhm.
get ahead of yourself and you don't appreciate what you have. And then you start getting anxious, and these kind of mental health negatives start piling on.
That's life in general. I can tell you, most of the time when I have anxiety, when I am just really, not well, and anxious, it's when I've gotten too far ahead of myself. So I think you make a great point, but I also think that that can apply to anybody. Anybody. And identity is, again, something I work with, pro sports, pro athletes, with high school and college. Who are you away from the field, the diamond, the pool, the court? Who are you? Who are you away from that? Because if you think you were only born to play sports, what a shame that is. There's so much more in you. And the best, most progressive coaches in schools are not intimidated by me coming in to share that. There's still some coaches that are like, well, I don't want you talking to him about, how to play the cello, or, how to do things outside of sports. He needs to focus, 1000% on this, or she needs to focus 1000% on what's going on in the sport. No, we are multi-level, multifaceted human beings. We need all parts of our soul to be alive and feeling and in touch, so that we can be the best, most well-rounded person.
What is the one question, and I am going to specify one question, that you think gets that response out of an athlete?
What sets your soul on fire? That's it. What sets their soul on fire? And for many of them, they've never been asked that. They've never pondered it. They never thought about it. They've only always been an athlete. They've only always, you know, been valued a lot of times. And I'm not mad at parents or family structures, but a lot of them have only always been valued for their athletic gifts. And then so when they get hurt, or when it ends, or when they need to take a mental health break, they feel like they're letting down a town, a city, a family. And one of the things I do want to tell athletes across the country is that feelings will lie to you. Feelings are fleeting and feelings will lie to you. And so oftentimes, especially with this recent, I would say in the past year, spate of high profile suicides with athletes, a lot of times athletes feel like, oh my gosh, my family's going to be so mad at me. My family's going to be, they're going to be disappointed in me. This is, blah, 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 blah. And when I talk to parents, which I do many times because many of them serve in my movement, I'm changing the narrative. They tell me, we just want them to be healthy and happy. We just want our child to be healthy and happy. And as long as they're healthy and happy, we're good. And if that means taking a break from the softball team or taking a break from swimming or taking a break from football because they're struggling mentally, they're not letting us down. They're not letting this town down. They're not letting us down. We love them just the same. But inside an athlete's head, oftentimes, are these weighted and massive expectations that they feel like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. And then oftentimes that is not true, that these people will love you no matter what. And you've got to do what is best for you.
How do you, as a parent, have that conversation with your child when you know that they are prone to competition, success, this kind of elite mentality that you have to keep working in order to stay ahead?
I mean, I think it's just that. I think you sit them down and say exactly what I just said. Hey, Sarah, I want to remind you, we are very proud of you for playing college softball. We love you. We love you no matter what. I've got a bonus daughter, Leah. So she wants to play, she's 15, but she wants to play a volleyball in college. So if it was her, I'd say, Leah, we love you. And we are so proud of you for playing volleyball at Penn State. You are amazing. But if you are ever feeling overwhelmed, if you are ever feeling in a dark place, if you're ever feeling depressed and anxious to the point where you feel like your sport is too much and you need to take a break, you need to step away, you need help, you need to talk to somebody, know that you are not defined by your sport. We do not love you because you play volleyball. We love you because you are you. We love you because you're a miracle. We love you because you're kind. We love you because you're smart. We love you because you exist. We love you if there was never any volleyball. So please, please, in your mind, if you ever have the feelings that you're letting us down because you're struggling mentally, if you ever talk to us, first of all, communication, open communication in every relationship makes everything better. Honest communication, real, kind, honest, thoughtful, respectful communication. So talk to us, Leah. Tell us what's going on. But baby girl, you need to know you are so much more than a volleyball player. And we are here to support you. And we love you if you're a volleyball player, and we love you if you're not.
Wow.
Yeah.
I find that when I talk to athletes who are removed from their sport, who have either retired because they've aged out, they've gotten injuries, they have fallen out of love with their sport, they have this period where they're kind of swimming in the void.
Yeah.
They're like, who am I outside of athletics? And they've never had enough time to cultivate that answer. How do you do both?
I mean, how you do both is administrations have somebody like me in. I'm not the ultimate answer. I'm not the only answer, but my program we've worked with in 6 years, over 60 colleges, many of them multiple times, Customs and Border Patrol, law enforcement in multiple states, halfway houses, prison ministry, high schools, corporations, wherever we'll go. And we will go. And we focus on good love for yourself, good love for others, purpose beyond athletics, purpose beyond your job, joy, mental health, interpersonal relationships. So yeah, having us in is one big one, because if you have programming like I'm changing the narrative in over a year or even one time or a couple of times, we are asking those questions. We are saying there will be a time in which you feel swimming in the abyss, you feel lost, you have no identity, this is over, you're injured, it's the next phase. And we want you to be prepared for that. We are so big, and I'm changing the narrative about talking about a battle plan, battle plan if you're experiencing negative mental health or suicidal ideations, you're depressed. A battle plan for when you get out of sports, a battle plan if you struggle with being faithful and you are growing in your sport and more people are throwing themselves at you. We have battle plans for everything. We have battle plans for what we call mama bears and papa bears that want to go to their schools and say, we need mental health resources. And that's what we do. One of the big things we do, and I'm changing the narrative, is teach people to have battle plans in all areas of their life.
When you were looking at becoming a broadcast journalist, prior to including the mental health aspect of your coverage, what was it about being in these atmospheres that made you feel like you belonged?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I probably didn't belong. I was a female. I was the first female host on Sirius XM on their collegiate channel. So there was a lot of people that think I did not belong. I just made a place for myself. I grabbed a seat, I formed a seat, whittled it out of wood, and I made a place for myself at the table. And that's what I did. And there were people that helped me, gave me tools to whittle the seat out of wood and to sit my behind on. And so I probably wasn't I didn't necessarily belong to start with. I broke a lot of ceilings. I was the first at several things. I was the first to host the college football playoff and do these things. So I don't necessarily know that I belonged. Maybe in some situations, but there were a lot where I was the first or one of the few. I still vote for the Heisman today, and I was able to share with my bonus kids the other day. It's like 875 people, and I'm one of them, and I was trying to explain that to my son. I was like, 875 people in the world. And he's like, in the world? And I said, yeah, in the world. And your bonus mom is one of those. So I think through sheer will and determination and refusal to quit until I retired. I retired in 2019 after hosting the first ever mental health game between Minnesota and Maryland. Collegiate game. It wasn't just helmet stickers and that was it. We did a whole week of programming. We did mental health talks. I was on campus. We did media. We had a joint PSA that ran during the game with Minnesota and Maryland players, both coaches, myself, saying don't struggle alone. People ask me all the time, what was the goal of that game? It was one person in the stadium or watching at home felt less alone and less defective and maybe was more open to talk about their mental health and ask for help, then we did our job. And so the next day I was flying to Mexico to go on a solo healing trip after losing my mother. I went to one of the last places we had vacationed together. And I was 33,000 feet in the air, and I wrote my retirement letter. And I retired while I was on the air at Sirius. I retired while I was employed. I left it to run my movement full time. And people ask me all the time if I miss it. And I tell them, no, I don't. I'm still in sports. I'm just in a different, more fulfilling role.
I remember that game. I
Yeah.
do. I remember that game, and I follow a lot of similar content creators doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I love The Hidden Opponent. They're one of my favorites, and they do so much programming with college athletes and games that are focused on mental health, that are mental health fundraisers, that are awareness walks. I don't think that we as content creators geared toward athlete mental health can do enough ever.
Amen.
So I love when I get to talk to someone who is actively helping in those avenues. I think it's so awesome that we get to link up and share what we've been doing and share ideas. I think it's awesome. So I'm so glad that you're talking to me today.
Yeah, no, and I'm grateful too. And here's the thing, I think about life, but especially with what we do, but anybody can take something from this. I know as athletes, and even in the broadcasting world, we were taught to believe she's your competition, he's your competition. And really, I've come to understand, man, I didn't think I was going to cry today. I've come to understand you're not my competition. You're not. I want you to win. I want you to succeed. I know my role in life, and my role in life is a connector. If somebody calls me and says, can you connect me with so-and-so? Can you help me? Can you do this? It's the greatest, one of the greatest joys I have to connect people. And you nailed it. We cannot do enough. Why would I say I'm better than this podcast, or I'm better than this movement? I'm bigger than that. No, we don't need your help. We do work with Same Here Global. We do work with, we've done work and partnered up and supported Helinski's Hope, just in behind the scenes and supporting his mother. We've done, podcasts and Twitter lives and Twitter spaces with other people in this realm, because like you said, we cannot do enough. You may reach somebody that I may never reach. It's why I am a huge proponent, I should say, on social media. I'll share your stuff. I'll retweet. I'll do that. I want to speak to people that have this lack mentality. Like, you feel like you can't share that because it's going to dim your light. You can't repost that. You can't. How do you know? Now I'm on a soapbox. How do you know there's not somebody in your network that needs to hear what Julia has to say, or what Eric Cusin has to say, or what Kim Helinski has to say, and they'll receive it from them. They might receive it from Eric or from Kim, and your delivery might not be what they need, right? And so you may touch somebody on your timeline, or where, and I think that goes even further. Like, it's like the whole thing, like, people that have home-based businesses, like one share, you share like their candle making company or their makeup company, like, and you can help them. So I don't know. I just, the older I get, the more I understand we need each other. We're not in competition with each other. And especially in mental health. I was listening to this awesome documentary, if you haven't seen it, and it's called Stutz on Netflix. And I think it's Jonah Hill and it's his therapist, and they made a movie for like 3 years about this man's like therapy ways and how it's revolutionary. I would watch it. But one of the things he says, I just started it, is that in depression, that relationships and people are like the handholds on like the side of the mountain. Like, when you're like just hanging on barely, relationships are the things, and people are the things that can reach through that depression and bring you out. And if I do anything with my life, I want to teach people that relationships and people, not fame, not money, not success, not any of those things. People are the greatest asset and the greatest joy. And the more we reach out to help other people, the better off we're going to be.
Amen. I feel like when I talk to athletes, they always come in knowing that they're an athlete and I'm a reporter. When I talk to sports psychologists, they're always coming at it from a very clinical perspective. When I talk to journalists who are covering these stories, I always get a very different perspective. And I think that it's so important to get the athlete representation, get the sports psychology representation. Nutritionists also give a very different perspective on these kind of issues. But there's something about interviewing journalists about how we cover as media members mental health. Mm-hmm. I think it brings a different avenue to this podcast that I honestly didn't intend on pursuing, but I think that it's very important, because we as journalists do sometimes tend to steer the narrative toward different things, different outreach. And I think that what you're doing is so interesting, because you're giving that space, that soapbox, that pedestal back to the athlete.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. I'll call out media. I used to be media for 17 years. I have friends in the media world who have had me on all the time talking about what I'm doing. I also have friends in the media world who have never written about me. And it's not about me. It's about the movement and the work we're doing. Let me just say that there is no ego here. They'll write about when somebody does something bad, when they lash out. There's this old adage in sports that says, if it bleeds, it leads. And like, that's the thing that people want to write about. They want to write about somebody getting in trouble, or the death, or the kicked off the team, or the negative stories. But I've always been attracted and pushed the positive human interest stories. And so I will issue a challenge to anybody listening to this podcast who is in media. Write the stories about the mental health walks, write the stories about the mental health games, write the stories about the mental health programming that's going on colleges, for administration, for teachers, for students, for athletes. Write those stories. Don't just write when somebody goes off the deep end. Don't just write those. Write the things beforehand that are being done preventative to try to make sure those things don't happen. So that is my kind of been my bugaboo, if you will, over the years with people. I'm pretty passionate about it. I don't mind sharing it. And to everybody who has had me or Julia on, or is talking about things that are happening in mental health, in the mental health space, good on you. Keep doing it. I have said to administrators across the country, and I've been screaming this on podcasts for years, is that we are past the time where you can say, we're good. We don't need you. We're good. We got it under control. And the other thing that's happening with athletes is you can have every single resource that you can have the world class resources, but if your athletes aren't going to use them, then what are we doing? And for some reason, athletes at Stanford, athletes at Wisconsin, athletes at Mississippi State, different athletes, and those are just the higher profile ones. I know that they had therapy there. I know that they had world-class psychologists there, but for whatever reason, those athletes didn't feel like they could use those. And so how do we get them to darken the doorways of those resources? I just had a conversation with the NCAA the other day, and I love people at the NCAA. I'm friends with them, but I have said this, like, you've got amazing resources, but the problem is, how do we get people to use those resources more? So my thinking is, and it's doing podcasts like this and talking to people like you, is, look, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take nutritionists, journalists, coaches, mental health specialists, therapists, psychologists, people like me, former journalists who now run a movement focused on it, athletes, parents. It's going to take all of us, pink, purple, black, white, young, old, coming together to talk about mental health, to talk about what we can do, how we can change the narrative. And that's how we try to put an end to what we're seeing out there right now.
At the top, there's a 5-minute countdown that just kicks us off the Zoom. If you click the link that you used, Zoom is weird.
Yeah.
It caps it. And if you just click the link that got you to this one, it'll restart the timer.
Okay.
But let's get back into what started your climb toward these kind of philanthropic efforts. I saw that you staged a climb of Mount Kilimanjaro for ALS research.
I did.
Tell me all about that.
Yeah, I did. I had a friend, he's in heaven now. His name's Kevin Turner. He played at Alabama. His nickname was the Anvil, the immovable force. He played for the Patriots and the Eagles and won the Ed Block Courage Award. Just an amazing human being. And he played in the NFL before there was really the focus and the understanding of concussions. And so he was diagnosed with ALS, and he really changed the trajectory of my life. It's been a while since I've talked about Kevin. He changed the trajectory of my life. He came into my studio one day, and I was doing this segment called Pay It Forward Friday, where I honored people in the sports world that were doing more with their life. He had just been diagnosed with ALS, and he needed help opening his soda top bottle, and he needed help turning up the headset on the volume headset, or excuse me, the headset volume. And I didn't want to, Julia, but I felt pity for him. And as soon as the interview started, he was talking to everybody out in the radio land in Birmingham, Alabama, where I did radio, but he was really talking to me. And he said, and I'll never forget his words, he said, "Don't you feel sorry for me? I got a heads up on my life. I say I'm sorry. I hug my kids. I live every day to the fullest." And he looked right at me and he said, "You could step off a curb tomorrow and you get hit by a bus." And he said, "You don't know." And like that just struck me. And I remember when he walked down the hallway, I was just like, wow, I'm going to fight for that man. I'm going to do something for him. And so I planned a fundraiser, and this is for anybody who's ever failed spectacularly. I've been talking about this lately. I planned a fundraiser for him. I put all my heart and soul into it. I did everything. I did media. I worked my butt off for it. And the night of the fundraiser, it was really the theater was half full, and I was mortified. I was really sad, and I didn't understand what was going on. And I went home that night, and I fell asleep on the couch. I was exhausted. I woke up, and I woke up to a documentary on Kilimanjaro, and I was like, that looks miserable. Why would anybody do that? Like, why? And then I went back to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I had this crazy idea of, let's climb Kilimanjaro. Let's climb for Kevin. And so 11 people summited in the spring of 2014. We went through a blizzard at about 3/4 the way up, about 17,000 feet. We should have turned back, but we did not. We raised over $80,000 for ALS research and awareness, and a movie was made about it. Mike Ditka, the famous Bears coach, narrated it, and it's still one of the greatest accomplishments of my entire life, because I did it for somebody else, and with no expectation of return or reward or any of those things. And it just, it rocks my world still.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah. Incredibly scary too. Incredibly miserable, but it was also incredible. Yes, that too.
Was that the first moment that you thought, I can live for more than myself?
No, I had a mom and a grandmother that lived for other people, and so I grew up seeing that, and I think that was emblazoned on my soul. In my book, my upcoming book next June, Relentless Joy, I talk about my mom taking me to the nursing home when I was younger, and delivering big honking blueberry muffins and sitting with people that had nobody visit them. She would specifically, I got to get that word out, ask who has not had a visitor in a really long time, and we would go sit with them. So no, that came to me through my family, and I thank God who created me.
I can't wait to continue this interview. We have less than a minute. I'm going to get off, and we'll meet back up.
Okay, perfect. So we got like 20 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have really lived a life for other people, starting very young. What was it about that kind of period in the mid 2000s that kicked it into gear? This is what I want to be doing. This is who I want to be doing this for. And and then kind of a caveat to that, how did I'm Changing the Narrative come out of that?
Yeah. I'm Changing the Narrative wasn't really born. And I talk also about this in my book, so you'll have to grab it next year. And it's on pre-order anywhere. If you go to Baker Book House, it's 40% off and free shipping right now, but you can just put in Relentless Joy anywhere in the Google bar and Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and you can pre-order it and have it for you when it comes out. But I didn't necessarily, first of all, in my 20s, I was to be very vulnerable. And I teach this in my movement, Radical Vulnerability. I was living a double life. I was battling addiction. And then on the other side of my life, I was climbing the ladder in sportscasting. And so, it was like two polarities. At night, I was using hard drugs. And during the day, I was, hustling and climbing the ladder and, being a family person and a friend and all of these things. But at night, I was battling addiction, and sometimes during the days. And around 2009, I got clean and never looked back. But even then, in that time, in my iniquity, and when I was struggling very, very badly and going through the throes of addiction, I still never forgot where I came from and how I was raised and who, loved me and all of those things. And so I always had a heart to serve others. I was born with that and cultivated by the people who loved me. And I say in the book that it's kind of like going to the optometrist, where as the years kept going in my 30s, I was like, I'm going to do something. Like, I can't figure it out. Like, it was like, they put the thing in front of your face and you can see that it's an R. You kind of know it's an R, but it's not, it's not clear. And you're like, you're straining. It could be a B. Like, you're like, what is that? And I remember even saying to one of my best friends, I remember saying to one of my best friends, we were driving around. This is crazy. It happened to do with retirement homes. She was working for nursing homes. And so during Valentine's Day, we went to to the grocery store in Atlanta and bought out all their flowers beforehand, and all their flowers and everything. We went to this nursing home that day and we passed out stuffed animals and flowers to people. And it was the best feeling. And we were driving home in her convertible, and our wind was kind of, whipping through our hair. And I remember saying to her, I'm like, I'm going to do something, but I couldn't clearly see what it was. I had a feeling and a premonition and, a prophetic sense that there was something there. I just didn't know what it was. I could never in my life imagine I'm changing the narrative. I wrote in 2016, I wrote a very simple Google Doc. And it was, what were you born for? Like, what were you born for outside of sports? What makes your heart beat faster? What's your legacy? What's your purpose? It was stuff like that. It was super simple. It was like 2 or 3 pages. And I remember thinking I was going to take it into high schools and just be in high schools. I never even, I'm embarrassed to admit this a little bit, but I never put 2 and 2 together, thinking that here I am, a college reporter. And I didn't think that it would go into colleges. Like, I thought that this was going to be a high school thing. And my friend, Dr. Kevin Elko, who works for the Colts, and Nick Saban, he's Nick Saban's right-hand man. He's a sports psychologist and a dear friend. He said, Rachel, he said, I'm going to introduce you to Jimbo Fisher at FSU. And I remember I was on family vacation in Jackson Hole. We did it every year. And he called and he said, FSU wants you to come speak to their football team. And I remember holding hands with my parents and jumping up and down and like in a circle. We were like, oh my God, having no idea what this thing would be. And for 3 years, I continued on broadcasting. I loved broadcasting. I had, done amazing things in broadcasting. It brought me a lot of fulfillment. But as the years, went on, particularly in 2019, I felt God telling me, this is what you're supposed to do. And it gotten to the point where I woke up with too much to do and I went to sleep with too much to do. Like, I couldn't catch my breath because I was trying to keep up with sports so that I could be on Sirius and do these other, different freelance jobs. And so I was trying to do my job well in that way. But then I was also traveling and speaking and talking to athletes and running this movement and doing all these things. And so it got to be too much. And really what I learned was that the 17 years as a broadcaster was just a runway for what I was doing with I'm Changing the Narrative. And so, yeah, I told you about the retirement story, and it was scary. So anybody who's on here contemplating doing something scary, let me tell you that there's magic in the uncomfortable spaces.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What did I'm Changing the Narrative set out to be at first, and how has it changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. At first, it was purpose, passion, platform, my own experience with domestic violence and changing the narrative of the headlines. You don't have to trend for something negative. You can trend for something positive. You can take the headlines back for something positive. That's how it started. And then I began to talk about, well, if I'm talking to men, and I started to call them kings, because I believe inside of every single one of us is a king, a queen, or royalty, because of what I call funky junk, which is trauma, bitterness, anger, unforgiveness, any of those things. A lot of us never realize it, right? Mental health issues. A lot of us never look in the mirror and realize there is greatness inside of us, and you were born for a purpose, and there's legacy inside of us. And so I set out to remind people of that. So then I started speaking to queens. Then I started talking about relationships. Then I started talking about mental health a little bit. And we were talking about mental health prior to the pandemic when the topic exploded. And it really changed. I would say another like pivotal point of when it changed was when my mom passed away. And a trigger warning for anybody that's watching this. She passed away May 1st. And then I find myself in July, and I am going through a loss of my mother. I'd had a loss of a breakup. And then I was also facing financial ruin because I had taken care of my mother and hadn't really worked. And I, on top of that, had sleep deprivation for 2 nights where I just couldn't sleep. I was getting up early for serious shows. And that's when I heard voices telling me to take my own life. And I told somebody yesterday, I believe the reason why I survived, I know this now, the reason why I survived is so that I could tell other people, you're not defective, you're not weak, you're not broken. Here's a battle plan. I did not know it at the time, but I know it now. You need to find 3 people that you would call if you had nothing or if you had everything. And you need to let those 3 people know, if I'm ever struggling, I'm going to call you. If I'm ever in a bad place, I'm going to call you. If I'm in a good place and I win the lottery, I'm going to call you. And what I teach people to do, and this came from my business manager, who's also an AA sponsor, is I teach people, if you're in a bad place and you're struggling, text or call your first person. Can't get them, text or call your second person. Can't get them, text or call your third person. And you may be in a situation where you're in a really dark place. Maybe you text or call that crisis hotline first, and you send out those other messages afterwards. Like, only you know where you're at in that space. But the point of having a battle plan is not suffering alone. Isolation is the thing that gets us. Feelings are the things oftentimes that get us. When I had that dark night of the soul, what I told myself and I believed was that I couldn't burden anybody because it was 3:00 in the morning. And when my family and friends found the story out, and I started to share it, they were devastated. They were really hurt, Julia. They were like, why? It hurts me that you did not feel like you could have called me. They were like, it would have wrecked my world to lose you. And so I teach people that those feelings will lie to you. Facts are feelings. What are facts or what are feelings? And the facts were that night that I was loved and precious. And so what if I lost my house? So what if I went to a breakup? I will heal. Yes, my mom died, but I'll see her again. That's what my faith tells me. And so I teach people to have that battle plan. But yeah, that is where really the movement blew wide open. I mean, it was already big. We'd already been to Alabama and Baylor and been a part of Baylor's resurgence under, Matt Rule. And we'd already been in the news. We made national news. We'd done all these things. But when we began to talk about mental health, and I went on the road and talked about my own story with mental health, it blew the movement wide open. Yeah.
I got chills. I love having people like you come on. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable. You are the reason that I do this. Like, it's like that.
Let me say this. I received that.
Why am I crying?
I know. Well, you're a good human. You're an empathetic human. And I will say this. I put my hand over my heart for a reason, because this is for anybody out there who feels like I do. I spent half my life not letting compliments really penetrate my heart, because I felt my childhood wounds were abandonment, rejection, and feeling unloved. And I have a friend, Melanie Reese, who's a psychologist, and she's very, very smart. And she says, everybody's got a screen. Everybody in their life has an emotional screen. It's like the screen on your window. And mine is the childhood wounds that I had, again, rejection, abandonment, feeling unloved. And you've got to attack that screen with the sword of truth. The sword of truth, Julia, is that I am loved. I am precious. I am wanted. I am valuable. I am a miracle. I am not rejected. I'm not abandoned. I'm not unloved. And so if I don't attack it constantly, because, positive mental health is a lifelong thing. We are going to be improving ourselves, hopefully working through things for the rest of our life. I don't know that you ever fully get there, right? Like fully. And so because of not attacking that screen for a lot of my life, when somebody would compliment me, I would say, normally I would have said, oh, you too, Julia, you're so great, and you are great, but I didn't receive it. So now when somebody gives me a genuine compliment, that is a gift from them, I put my hand over my heart and I take a moment to breathe and just say, thank you. Thank you for that. That is a gift that you've given me, and I fully receive that.
Wow.
I know, right? I am a product of all. I've mentioned them, Dr. Elko, Melanie Reese, I'm a product of all these people that have poured into me. And so when I go out and speak, I tell people, these are the people that are inspiring me lately. There's been a quote lately that's been rocking my world, and it's by Desmond Tutu. And it says, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, but it says, we got to stop just saying, hey, people are falling in the river. We've got to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place. And so I think that is very, very applicable with what we're seeing with the suicide epidemic right now. Okay, people are killing themselves. It's not enough to stare at the river and say people are killing themselves. We have to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place.
I mean, I think that I don't talk to a lot of people who have dealt with suicidal ideation on this podcast, but there are a few. Do you know of Morgan's Message?
I've heard of Morgan's Message, and I would love if you would make a contact, make a connection.
I would love to.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I've been watching from afar and I've been fangirling, but I don't have the connection.
So I did an episode with them a while ago. I had found one of their ambassadors. They have a large college program with ambassadors at a bunch of colleges. And I had reached out to one and said, hi, I'm really interested in this. Can you come on and talk to me about it? And so we did, and that interview part was great. And then I DM'd the actual Morgan's Message Instagram and said, hi, I have one of your ambassadors for an episode. Can you give me, like, send someone from like the original organization to come talk to me? And I ended up with Morgan's twin sister. And
wow.
it was the most incredible interview I've ever done. And like, she cried, I cried. It was the most vulnerable space for her to just work with me through the traumatic experience of losing her sister to suicide. But then Morgan's Message and how it kind of spiraled out of control in an amazing way after that, and now it's what it is now. And they work a lot with The Hidden Opponent and Helinski's Hope and all of these other groups of people who are trying to raise awareness. And she said this incredible quote. She was like, this kind of ties back to what you and I were talking about earlier, about all working toward this one collective goal of increased awareness. She was like, I feel like it would be foolish if we worked in parallel. We're all part of this weird effed up group of people who have lost someone, and we don't want that to happen to anyone else. And I was like,
it perfectly.
Man. But it was in that moment that I was like, we're not working in parallel. None of us are.
We're not. And you don't have to have a mental health group to not work, and you don't have to run a mental health group to do that. You can work together by being kind at the coffee shop. You can do that by calling somebody by their name on their name tag. You can do that by leaving a big honking tip. You can do that by leaving something on the ticket that says your eyes are beautiful. You can do that by, when you're met with somebody who is being unkind. One of my favorite things to do, and I'm not always great at it because I'm human and I fail like everybody else, but one of my favorite things to do is when somebody is being ugly to me out in the world, is to try to genuinely connect with them. So say I'm at a drive-through, or my server or somebody's just very short, very ugly. There's been situations where I've said, how are you? You having a good day? And say, no, not so much, or da, da, da. This is a perfect example. There was a woman at a Publix where I used to live, and I would go through her line all the time. And she was just very stern, very dry, I'm not saying mean, but she was just bitter. I could see it. I could smell it. And finally, I just kept trying. I went through her line and I would just, I hope you have a good day, or, I'm thinking about you, or how are you today? And finally, she admitted to me that she has a daughter at home that had a motorcycle accident, that has a brain injury, and she is taking care of her adult daughter, and she will for the rest of her life. And so it was insane to me to keep trying to be kind to this woman and find out that the source of her bitterness and her standoffishness was the fact that she was dealing with so much at home. So I say all that to say is, you don't have to run a mental health movement. You don't have to have a podcast to work in concert with other people. You can just be a good human being. And when you mess up, and you aren't nice, go back. I've called people back before at call centers and said, can I talk to Kim? And they're like, what? And I'm like, I was mean to Kim yesterday and I need to find out who Kim was. I've seriously done that before to like at Venus, and then trying to figure out some information on my 401k years ago when I worked in Atlanta, and the people were like, what? And they're like, and so they tracked down the Kim, or they gave Kim the message. And so, yeah, you don't have to have a podcast or a movement to do those things. It's an everyday thing. And the more we, as a people, start to collectively notice other people, we call it being a noticer, joy starter. We actually have a club. If you go to joystartersclub.com, joystartersclub.com, or my website is imchangingthenarrative.org. But Joy Starters, it's the cost of a cup of coffee a month. You get a journal, and you're in a group with other like-minded people who are cultivating joy, spreading joy, loving on people. And yeah, you can do that. You don't have to have a podcast. You don't have to have a movement. You don't have to be a journalist. You can do that every single day just by being a good human being.
Oh, I'm done with my questions and I just want to keep talking to you. This is amazing.
Can we do this again? Like this?
Well, yes.
Hey, yay. Yeah, let's do this again, because my book's coming out next June.
Yeah.
And so maybe closer to time, let's do it again and keep talking about it and do a part 2. And one of my greatest joys is doing podcasts with people that I haven't met. And then by the end of it, we feel like we're best friends and we want to do another podcast. So
I feel like that too. There have been some guests that I've had that I finish my questions and I say, okay, we're done with the questions for today. And I'm like, can we just be best friends?
We can. And when you release this podcast, please, in the future, I tell people all the time, tag me and stuff. Yeah. If you want a tweet to go further, or an Instagram post, or whatever it is, a TikTok, tag me and I'll share it. I'll repost it. That's what we're here for. And yes, we are officially friends now.
Yay. Okay, one more question for you. Yes. Your episode will come out on the 21st.
Okay.
So right ahead of Christmas.
Yay.
One of the things that I really like doing with my season 2 guests, I'm putting a playlist of songs together on YouTube.
Okay.
And I'm having each guest contribute one song. It could be something that pumps you up, something that has gotten you through some kind of mental health struggle. It could be something that chills you out. And you don't have to answer right now, but if you do have a song that you can think of right now, I would love to add it to the list. But you can always email me at a later date.
Yeah. So Ben Harper with My Own Two Hands is one of my faves.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
The playlist that has come out of this question is bizarre.
You gotta share it with me. I'm sure it's insane.
It's really crazy, but it just shows the versatility of music. I think that in the same way that sports blends cultures, music does the same. And I think it's been a really cool question to ask at the very end. Like once we wrapped up all of our questions, hey, can you add one song?
Mm-hmm. I love it. Whenever you have that playlist, please share it with me.
Yeah, it's up on our Instagram at Mental. In the link tree, I have the playlist up there.
What's the Instagram account again?
At Closer Mental.
At Closer Mental. Okay, I will write it down, my dear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'll reach out to you next week once this episode is published. If there's anything that happens between now and then that you would like included in the script, please tell me. And I'll talk to you once this is published. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I hope you loved the episode. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing.
Thank you, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye. You too.